Picture a child, maybe 4 years old, standing at the edge of a fire. Her mother died 3 days ago. Her father hasn't come back from the hunt in 2 weeks and probably never will. She has no siblings old enough to feed her. She can't find food alone. She is, by every modern definition, completely alone in one of the most dangerous environments that has ever existed. And here is what you almost certainly assume happened next. She died. That's the story we've been told about prehistoric life. The weak perished. Orphans perished. You probably picture ancient tribal existence as a brutal arithmetic where only the biologically useful survived, and a parentless child was simply a problem that resolved itself. That assumption is wrong. And the real story changes something fundamental about what you think humans are. Here's the thing nobody tells you. We spent decades studying ancient human societies through the lens of competition and survival of the fittest, and we built a mythology out of it. The idea that prehistoric life was a pitiless filter, that orphaned children were abandoned or left to the elements, has shaped everything from our politics to our psychology. But the real story is that ancient human tribes were extraordinarily organized systems of collective childcare, with specific social roles and what can only be called institutional care for children who lost their parents. Understanding this will change how you think about human nature itself. The question the entire rest of this video is going to answer: what actually happened to orphaned children in the ancient world, and what does the answer reveal about us? To understand this, you have to imagine a world before cities, before agriculture, before any of the social scaffolding we take for granted. You are living approximately 50,000 years ago in a band of somewhere between 20 and 150 people. You can smell wood smoke and animal fat and dried grass. You can hear children and the distant sound of something large moving through trees at dusk. Every single person in the band is known to every other person. There are no strangers inside the group. Every child is watched by every adult every day because a dead child is a catastrophic loss to a group that reproduces slowly. In 2009, anthropologist Sarah Hrdy at the University of California, Davis, published her landmark work on what she called cooperative breeding in early human societies. Her research synthesized decades of primate studies and ethnographic data and reached a conclusion that turned evolutionary psychology upside down. Human children were never meant to be raised exclusively by two parents. The architecture of early human social life was built around shared infant care from the very beginning. Here's why that matters. The village raising a child was not a metaphor. It was the survival strategy. Hrdy's work opened a door, and other researchers walked through it fast. In 2012, anthropologist Kim Sterelny at the Australian National University published research documenting how children in hunter-gatherer bands were embedded in webs of care that extended far beyond biological parents. Scientists have actually observed this in living communities that still exist today. Among the Aka people of Central Africa, studied by anthropologist Barry Hewlett at Washington State University since the 1980s, children who lose parents are absorbed into the broader band within days. They are fed, carried, and mentored by multiple adults simultaneously, with no formal ceremony and no deliberation. It simply happens the way breathing happens because the social wiring for it runs deep. Aka fathers hold their infants more hours per day than fathers in any other documented culture on Earth. No, stop imagining a prehistoric world of emotional coldness. The evidence shows something closer to the opposite. Orphans were never a category of child that ancient humans had to think about, because the concept could barely exist in a world where 50 people all knew your name. But knowing this from living communities is one thing. What stopped researchers cold was when the same pattern started showing up in the ground, carved into bones and buried in graves tens of thousands of years old. Here's where it gets extraordinary. Researchers examining burial sites from the Upper Paleolithic period found something that stopped the field cold. At multiple sites across Europe and Central Asia, archaeologists discovered the carefully buried remains of children interred with objects that could only have been placed there by adults who were not biologically related to them. In Sunghir, Russia, dated to approximately 34,000 years ago, 2 children were buried with over 10 hand-carved ivory beads, an investment of labor researchers estimate at thousands of hours. These children showed skeletal evidence of developmental conditions that would have made them dependent on sustained adult care for years. They were not the offspring of the group's highest status individuals. Someone who did not have to care for them chose to, worked for them, and buried them with what can only be described as grief. Let that sink in. And this raises a question that has been debated for decades among paleoanthropologists. Was this kind of care an exception, a rare act of altruism in an otherwise hard world, or was it simply what ancient humans did as a matter of course? Imagine for a moment that you are that person at Sunghir. You are not related to these children. You did not choose them with deliberation and paperwork and the luxury of saying no. You simply lived near them, and when their parents were gone, you became what they needed. You can feel the weight of the smaller child when you carry them. You can hear them stop crying when they recognize your face. You spend winter evenings carving small shapes from ivory, not because anyone told you to, but because you have watched the child's face when you give them something beautiful, and you want to see that face again. This is what ancient humans did. Not occasionally. Every single day, in band after band, on every continent where humans lived, the evidence stacks from there. In 2018, a team led by Marco Langbroek at Leiden University examined skeletal data from 66 Neanderthal individuals and found multiple people who had survived severe debilitating injuries years past the point those injuries would have proved fatal without sustained care. Some of those individuals were children. A child with a broken leg surviving years in a mobile hunter-gatherer band is not luck, it is deliberate care. In 2021, Eric Trinkhaus at Washington University in St. Louis documented a Neanderthal child approximately 6 years old at death with a cranial deformity causing severe disability from birth. This child survived to age 6 in a world where survival was the dominant daily challenge. Here's what the history books leave out. This pattern appears across every continent where we have sufficient burial data. Multiple cultures across hundreds of thousands of years independently arrived at the same answer. You take care of the children, even when they are not yours, because the alternative is a kind of community no one chooses to live in. That closes the loop this video opened. Ancient tribes did not abandon orphans. They absorbed them. The cross-cultural evidence for this is now overwhelming. Today we have foster care systems and bureaucratic processes that can take months to place a child with a permanent family. Children who age out of the modern system without placement are dramatically more likely to experience poverty and early death. We traded a world where your tribe's children were automatically your children for a world where a parentless child is a legal problem requiring a solution. We gained scale, anonymity, and individual freedom. We lost the automatic, instinctual network of care that made orphanhood nearly impossible for most of human history. We traded the village for the system, and most of us never even knew the village was real. In 2015, archaeologists at Romito Cave in Calabria, Italy, analyzed remains dated to approximately 17,500 years ago. Among them was an adolescent between 14 and 17 years old who had suffered from severe acromesomelic dysplasia, a condition severely limiting the use of both arms from early childhood. This person could not hunt, could not gather food, could not defend themselves, or build shelter. And yet they survived into adolescence in a mobile hunter-gatherer band living through one of the harshest periods of the last ice age. Think about that for a second. Someone decided every single morning for over a decade that this person was worth feeding, not because they were useful, not because they produced anything measurable, because they were there, they were known, they were part of the group, and that was enough. 17,500 years later, we are still arguing about whether that instinct is affordable. You thought you knew the answer before you started watching this. You pictured the ancient world as a place where a child without parents was erased by the cold mathematics of scarcity. But every burial, every healed bone, every ivory bead placed in a small grave says something different. The ancient world was not more brutal than ours in this particular way. In many ways, it was more tender. 50,000 years before anyone invented the word orphan, your ancestors already had an answer, and it was never abandonment.